Hello, I'm Bill O'Donnell, and welcome to another program on spirituality. Today in the studio, I have a very old friend. I haven't seen him in years. I didn't even recognize him when he came in, Father Gino Carrera. He is the new provincial of the Franciscan Friars here in Our Lady of Guadalupe province. Welcome, Father Gino.
Hello, Bill. It's good to be here with you. Yeah. It's good to see you again. You've changed.
Yeah, we have too. I mean, when I saw Father last, he hadn't had that transfiguration experience yet, and he was all brown. He had brown hair and a beard.
I had that pretty much throughout my formation and about 20 years of my priesthood. In fact, when I was in Clovis and Roswell, it was just a common thing that children would come up to me, and sometimes the little tykes would say, "Hi, God," and look at me, and that was all right. But then it came to a point when my hair started to change colors, and I had a little girl come up to me and say, "Hi, Santa Claus," and I decided it was time to change.
That's great. Father Gino has just been elected by your brother friars just this year, 2009, right?
July 1st.
July 1st, boy, okay. And we previously were fortunate enough to have his predecessors on a program together, Father Meldon, Father Gilbert, and Father Larry, who turned the reins over to you, and it was a blessing to have him here. So, and this year in 2009, 2010, we are celebrating the 400th anniversary of the faith here in New Mexico, brought by your forebears, the Franciscans, original Franciscans from Spain, that brought the faith in here. And as our Holy Father, the late John Paul the Great, said as he flew over to Phoenix, he addressed us from the airplane.
That's right.
Did you hear that as well?
Yes, I did.
You know, people of New Mexico, and he talked about this is the cradle of Christianity in the New World. Anyhow, so it's great to have you, Father. Welcome.
Thank you. And we are indeed celebrating 400 years here in Santa Fe. The Franciscan Order is celebrating, or we're just finishing this year with our 800th celebration of St. Francis, and our own province of Our Lady of Guadalupe. This year, in 2010, we'll be celebrating 25 years as a province here in the Southwest.
Wow, how time flies, huh?
It sure does.
Because you started out as a member of John the Baptist province out of Cincinnati?
Correct, correct. In fact, when I first went to the seminary back in 1963, I was just in the 8th grade, and back then we had high schools where we were able to educate young men studying for the Franciscan life. And when I entered, I went to Cincinnati, so I traveled all the way from New Mexico out to Cincinnati, and I still remember that my very first meal, here I am, a New Mexican, raised on burritos, red chili, green chili, and I sit down to eat my first meal in Cincinnati, and it's a plate of sauerkraut. I'd never seen it. I'd never smelled anything like that in my life, and I thought, this is going to be a very short vocation. But it worked out, and I love sauerkraut.
Right. So tell us where you were born and raised.
I was born in Belen, New Mexico, and I was born to parents who were both deaf mutes, and being the oldest of 5 children, there was a real concern on the part of my parents, both deaf mutes. They met each other, as a matter of fact, here in Santa Fe at the School for the Deaf. And so when they married and had their first child, which was me, we lived with my grandparents in Belen, New Mexico, so that I would be able to hear speech and to learn speech. And so actually Spanish was my first spoken language, but they tell me that even as a child, sign language was really my first language, was the mother tongue that I was raised with. And even as a child, I had baby talk that I did with my hands. And shortly after that, we moved around a lot, and I consequently lost a lot of my Spanish and spoke English. And then when I went to the seminary in Cincinnati, it was English, all the way up to the time I was ordained a priest in 1976, and ordained by then Archbishop Joseph Bernardin in Cincinnati, who then became Cardinal Bernardin of Chicago. And so it was a privilege to be ordained by such a wonderful, holy man as Joseph Bernardin. And I was assigned in 1976 back to New Mexico, to Clovis, New Mexico, out on the Eastern Plains. And I still remember coming out in my habit there in the parish of Our Lady of Guadalupe. A little old lady came up to me and says, when she heard my name, Correa, she said, gracias a Dios, al fin, un padre mexicano. He says, at last, a Mexican priest. Yeah. Well, it was scary because I didn't understand a thing she said. And I said, no hablo español. And she said to me, and I'll never forget, no te preocupes, nosotros vamos a enseñar. He said, don't you worry, we'll teach you. And that has really been one of the greatest lessons of my Franciscan and priestly life out here, is that the people have embraced me, have embraced us, and it's been a very mutual kind of formation that has taken place over the years of my bringing the gospel and their preaching the gospel also from their perspective. And what a meeting.
Was the grandparents, were they your father's parents or mother's parents?
Well, actually, we took turns. We lived with my father's parents in Belen, and my grandmother on my father's side was an evangelist for the Pentecostal Baptist Church there. And she always tells me, you know, I always prayed that one of my grandchildren would grow up to be a minister of the gospel. And when I became a Catholic priest, she came up to me and says, I guess I wasn't specific enough.
So did she got to witness your, not your ordination, but the
she was there at my first Mass, and I was very close to my grandmother Clarita. She was very much a woman of Scripture, and it was really due to her influence that I became very much someone who fell in love with the Scriptures. And it's a very important part of my priesthood, a part of my being a Franciscan. And I do credit a lot of that influence to her. And she married my grandpa Jesus, who had a wonderful tradition of gathering the grandchildren, and there were a lot of us. You know, he would gather us outside a lot of times around a tree stump that he had carved into a chair, and he would sit there, and he would tell stories, just stories of our culture, of our family, of our faith. And what was wonderful is that a lot of times the stories would begin by one of the grandchildren pointing to a scar on his arm, or that glass eye that he had, or a little, you know, mark or a tattoo, and we would just ask, what's that? Or, ¿qué pasó? And he would launch into a story. And those stories, like the stories that Jesus told, would usually carry a lot of, you know, levels of meaning that taught us, formed us, and just really helped us to, I think, realize something very important, in that we belong to something bigger than just ourselves. So
your family, at least part of your family's been here in New Mexico a long time?
Well, actually, both sides. My father's mother and father came from Mexico. Both of them came from Mexico. And my mother's side of the family, my grandparents on that side, were both New Mexican, but with strong roots in, on my grandfather's side, on my mother's side, from Mexico, but my great-grandmother was Navajo. She was a Navajo from Torreon. And so I have some Navajo blood in me. I have some Aztec blood in me from my father's side of the family in Mexico, and some French. I'm quite a mixture.
Oh, that's right. So just right for New Mexico.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's great. Tell us, how did you get the call to the priesthood, and the Franciscans specifically?
Well, it's interesting, Bill, because, you know, there are a lot of people who can point to a specific time and date or circumstance when they feel they got the call, or when they feel that they were truly transformed, you know. And I'd have to say that mine has been a lifelong process. I still remember when I moved back to New Mexico from California. I had moved out there with my parents. My aunt took me under her wing and said, you know, you need to get some more Catholic education under your belt. And so she put me at Sacred Heart Catholic School here in Albuquerque. And I had the Adrian Dominicans teaching me there for 3 years. And it was there that I can honestly say that I fell in love with my Catholic faith. And I still remember that at that time, we had a lot of the 8th graders who were looking at going to the seminary here in Santa Fe. One of them was Richard Alona, who is now Monsignor Alona. Yeah. And I remember watching him and the excitement.
Who's also from Belen.
Yes, I believe so.
Yeah.
But, you know, he just lived a few blocks from me here in Albuquerque, and I would see him going to school, and I really did. I got excited by someone who was excited about becoming something, and he was going to be a priest. And I still remember that I wanted to do that. I wanted to go to the seminary, and I don't think it was so much the idea that I wanted to be a priest or that I wanted to do that kind of work. It was because of someone that I admired doing something that I thought I would like. And I remember going to the parish priest at Sacred Heart and saying, you know, I wanted to go to the seminary in Santa Fe. Well, he just laughed at me because I was, well, let's say that I visited his office quite often. And so I thought, well, you know, I better go somewhere where they don't know me too well. And I went to Holy Family Church on Atrisco, which later on I became pastor of. Yeah. But I went there and met Father Howard Meyer, and that was really the first time I met a Franciscan. He came to the door, this tall man in a brown habit, and I just remember I was struck because he looked like someone that I had seen before, and I was trying to remember, who is that? And I remembered that my grandmother, on my mother's side, like so many others, had a statue and a portrait of St. Anthony of Padua and of St. Francis. You know, St. Francis has always been one of those figures that is, you know, so familiar in the altarcitos and in the images that you see in many of our Catholic homes.
So what was the transformation for you as you studied for the priesthood and then got ordained? I mean, how did you evolve in your spiritual life as a result of that?
I think that the biggest transformation came through the experience, I would have to say, of a new family and a friendship. And that has always been the constant factor throughout the years of growing deeper in an understanding that really what it's all about is relationship. It's about relationship. It's how we are with each other and what we are called to be for each other in terms of the brotherhood that all of us share in because of the fact that we are all children of the same God. And it's been that experience of growing in a sense of belonging to, as I said earlier, something much bigger than just me as an individual, just us as a nuclear family, just us as a neighborhood. I've been, as a Franciscan, been blessed to meet so many people, so many cultures, to have so many experiences of both misery and joy, and in both have found, you know, God's presence so powerfully there, bringing us together.
How about when you administer the sacraments and you are, for instance, when you're baptizing a child or an adult even, and what actually happens at that time? What is your experience of bringing someone into the faith, whether as an infant or as an adult?
Well, I think that the experience is that experience for all of us, that I, as a minister of the church and as a minister of the good news, am able to truly and hopefully authentically rejoice and celebrate with these parents their new beginning, the gift of life, and the gift of life that their love has brought forth. And it's just a wonderful experience of being able to get in touch with the experience of God speaking and touching us at that moment through the gift of this child, through the gift of this new life. And it's always a wonderful teaching moment where we look at ourselves and we ask ourselves, that question of, who am I? Who am I as a priest to hold this precious gift of life and to celebrate with this family this baptism? And when I'm in touch with that, it helps me to help them get in touch with just the wonder of it all, the wonder of who they are as parents, as a couple,
Well, that's great. Listen, if you've just joined us, we're having a conversation with Father Gino Carrera.
Not even close, Bill.
Do it for me again.
Correa.
Correa, thank you.
Correa,
I appreciate that.
you got it.
Sorry to get that the first time. I had it the first time, I lost it.
Well,
Correa.
it's a it's a name that is really Hispanic. It's Mexican, and of course, because of my name Gino, everybody presumes I'm Italian.
Yeah.
And I'm not, except for my maybe appetite and the name. But my name, baptismal name, was Esteban Miguel Domingo Correa de Sanchez Jr. There were two of us, believe it or not.
Oh, that's
and Gino is the name I received
You're
as
a twin?
friar.
You're one of a twin?
No, my father was Esteban Miguel.
Anyhow, Father Gino has been just elected the brand new provincial of Our Lady of Guadalupe province here in the Archdiocese of Santa Fe, but they serve all throughout the Southwest, and primarily, though, New Mexico and Arizona, right?
Exactly. Our province is located mainly in the Navajo Reservation of Arizona in the Diocese of Gallup. We've been there for many, many years. We serve the Pueblo Native Americans here in the Archdiocese of Santa Fe, as well as some parishes that we have here, Holy Family in Albuquerque, and then we're also located within the Diocese of Las Cruces. But beyond that, we have our house of formation in San Antonio, Texas, and there's quite a few friars in San Antonio, the Houston area, who are made up of some of our friars and the Franciscans from the Sacred Heart province who are located in St. Louis. And there's a lot of collaboration that goes on among the Franciscan family. The Franciscan family being made up of us friars, OFM, the Second Order, the Poor Clares, who are located in Roswell, New Mexico, and of course our secular Franciscans, lay men and women, who very much are a part of the family. And so there's a lot of collaboration between the three families in different areas. We have different friars in maybe some remote areas. In fact, just at our last provincial council meeting, we approved one of our brothers who is going to be joining some other friars in Vietnam to have that experience of mission. It's a very important part of our lives.
Well, one of your missions, I just want to bring to your attention this brand new St. Anthony Messenger from September 2009, if you can see that, I hope. And here there is a nice picture of St. Francis Cathedral, where it was under your tutelage for almost 80 years up until just recently. And we are currently celebrating in this 2009-2010 year the 400th anniversary of the Franciscans bringing the faith to New Mexico, this part of the world, before it was even a state.
Exactly.
So I bring that attention. It's a wonderful piece. And I'm indebted to my former rector, Father Crispin Butts, who provided this for me and has been a real help behind the scenes. There's so much faith here. And I read a recent article by the late Ambassador Ortiz, and I think you got a chance to read that as well.
I did.
And it was so touching, but it said something that just, kind of was underneath the radar. But he said that the people of New Mexico, their culture, their temperament, their sensibility is so very Franciscan. It was his experience, and he noticed it. And it's true, isn't it, that specifically the Hispanic people of New Mexico just are imbued with that Franciscan sensibility. Is that an accurate thing to say?
Oh, definitely. And not just the Hispanic, but the Native Americans.
Yeah.
We are very much a part of the landscape of New Mexico. And
You're at every pueblo, aren't you, just about?
if
Yeah.
we're not there now, we were.
Yeah. Right.
We were.
And for hundreds of years.
Exactly, exactly. And I think that, you know, as Franciscans, we certainly are a part of that history, the good and the bad. I mean, we have traveled together, and we have become very much a part of how they identify the church, the Catholic Church. When they see a Franciscan, you know, they know that this is something that is very much a part of who they are and where they've been.
I've got to ask you, because you mentioned your part Navajo ancestry in your
Right.
own blood. What was it like for you to be on a Navajo reservation, to be with those people and know that that blood courses through your veins?
Well, it's the experience that I had when I was in my first Spanish parish, and that was the realization that I had become disconnected. I had become disconnected. And that was a very important part of my, I think, formation in recognizing that, you know, in the journey of life, we learn a lot of things. We unlearn a lot of things. And both things a lot of times go on at the same time. And I recognized that in terms of who I am as a Hispanic, who I am as a person who has Navajo blood in him, that there are a lot of things that I've become out of touch with. And the only way to get in touch with that, to get reconnected, is to extend myself to them and allow them to extend themselves to me. And it is in that connection of friendship, of embracing one another in our strangeness, that we, I think, get reestablished with who we are. And it's really a more recent chapter in my life that I'm becoming connected with the Navajo part of myself through getting in touch with the very important ministry that our friars have done for years and years. It's an apostolate that we're concerned about here in Arizona and New Mexico because, like many other religious groups, we are suffering diminishment through age, and we find ourselves needing to look at the work we do with the Navajos and to ask ourselves, what do we need to do to continue this very important apostolate, this very important ministry? So I find myself getting out there as much as I can to meet with the friars, the people, and the many others who help us in this ministry and work with us. So as I do that, I'm getting in touch with, well, just a lot of different levels of history, my own personal history, our history as a province, and our history as a church.
So why don't we say a word about that, about vocations? I mean, you've talked about the joy of it, and it sounds like you're a joyful man and you've enjoyed your priesthood. Is that fair to say?
Definitely. I think that one of the things that is so important, and I learned this from my grandpa Jesus, is that if we're not able to tell our own story with a sense of, you know, this is me, this is where God has touched me and formed me and called me, then we don't really have much to say. You know, I think that it has really been a wonderful thing to be able to share my story as a priest and my story as a Franciscan with people, and especially with young people.
Yeah.
You know.
But just in the few minutes we have remaining, what recommendations or advice would you have for those people out there who may not be Catholic, who may have never even seen a Franciscan friar before, and what are the benefits that you've experienced, or what could they experience practicing the faith of Catholicism?
Well, I think that one of the things that is so important in all of our lives is being able to extend ourselves to the stranger. And so if the Catholic is the stranger, I would invite them to embrace us. And I would invite us to do the same. You know, that that reciprocity of embrace and of telling our story and sharing that story and recognizing within that story his story, which is the story that brings us together. It's a story of love. It's the story of true self-giving in order that we might indeed be all one body, you know, one church.
I'd be remiss if I didn't mention our mutual friend, Sister Jado Moots, who I think introduced us originally. She tells me that you were an artist.
Well, that's very nice of her. And she certainly is the artist that I have come to appreciate in terms of helping me to recognize one of the Franciscan elements, and that is that beauty is a moral imperative. Beauty is really one of the things that makes, I believe, us who we are as Franciscans. It is who St. Francis was. It's beauty that we recognize in all of creation. It is beauty in the human person. It is beauty in the human story, you know. And it's being able to recognize that, see that, and be thankful for that, celebrate it, you know, and to help people who don't see it. That's the story of evangelization, to help them recognize their preciousness and their own beauty.
Yeah, sounds good. Because I remember in John where Jesus said, "All this I tell you, why? So that my joy may be yours, and your joy may be complete."
Exactly.
This is my command: love one another as I have loved you. And it seems that beauty would have to be a part of that.
It is indeed. It is indeed. And I believe that here in New Mexico, if there's anything to see, it is God's beauty. It's God's beauty in the nature that we have around us, in the many cultures and languages, peoples, the history that is ours, the beauty of it all.
That's great.
And we all share in that.
All right. Well, listen, we only got a couple minutes left. I just want to thank you, Father Gino. It's been great to see you again and have you come in, and to wish you well in your journey as now becoming the head servant of the servants of God and the friars here in New Mexico and Arizona. It's been a blessing to have you here, and I wish you well, and to all the other friars. And please come back sometime and share with us some more here on Spirituality TV.
Thank you. It's been a privilege, and I'm very grateful.
All right. And give my regards to your predecessors, Father Larry, Father Gilbert. And we remember, of course, the first provincial, the late Father Meldon Hickey, who was a special person in all our hearts, I believe.
Yes, and it is on their wonderful shoulders that I stand, and Larry and Gilbert are still very hard at work.
That's true. Okay. Well, I hope some of this has been of value to you. I encourage you to go to that website, be in the credits, but I think, what did we decide? It's www.olgofm.org. Our Lady of Guadalupe, OFM, the Franciscans, or just Google them up, the Franciscans, you'll find them. Some wonderful information there. And if you want to get a hold of Father Gino or any of the Franciscans around, to check out their spirituality and spend some time with them, I would highly regard that myself. It would be wonderful to do. So on behalf of everyone here behind the scenes, our director Marshall, our tech support in George, and our camera people Jim and Alana, thank you for viewing. And we hope that you'll see us again here next week at this time on the same channel, Spirituality TV. So thank you for viewing.
Thank you.
Bye.